Hey everyone. Seems like quite a few people saw my interesting appearance on the 7:30 report last Thursday, which was great in a lot of ways. Interesting experience for me. I'd want to thank Tracy Bowden and the team at the ABC who did a great job, and I thought the story was a very fair representation of both my views and the issue. So no problems at all on that account. However, obviously within the limitations of 30 seconds it's difficult to say everything you want to say about a particular issue. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to just put up a quick video and elaborate a little bit further on the points that I was making then, and a couple of additional ones as well. Fully aware that this will be viewed by, probably 20 people, but that's okay. At least I feel happier that I've been able to say my full piece on these issues. On the first question, the compensation question, which was the primary focus of the piece last week on the ABC, I wanted to make the point, and I do now, that obviously the period of time in which the elective surgery ban has been in place turned out to be only 29 days, which is, to all intents and purposes, a month. When it was originally announced, we did not know that it would be quite such a brief time. In fact, many people thought it would be 3 or 4 months, maybe even 6 months. And the implications of a period of non-usage, particularly on the hospital side of private health insurance products for that level of time, was very profound, and obviously meant that the industry, the private health insurers, would be potentially gaining an enormous windfall. As it's turned out, the number of Covid-19 patients has been less than anticipated, and the call on the private hospital sector has not really come through in the way that some thought it might, and as a result the ban on elective surgery, subject to PPE considerations and other general material issues, has been able to be lifted to some degree. So that meant that the period of time in which this actual windfall moment occurred was more reduced, as I said, about a month. As I said on the show as well, my estimation was that that meant that of the premium revenue which would have been gained during that period, approximately 2 billion, my thought was that it would be maybe 1 billion would have been allocated to normal claims expenditure, and the second half would have possibly ended up being non-spent, although with the potential for a kickback or a sort of a bounce back once things resumed. It now seems that estimate was pretty much around the money, which is an interesting figure, because when you consider that annual profitability in the entire industry last year was about, or at least as of the last stats, was about 1.4 billion. We're looking at fully 2/3, maybe 3/4 of a year's profit, so it's still a very substantial number. However, I do acknowledge, and I think it's true, that we will see later in the year a bit of a stepping up, subject to the government's rules in relation to claiming, processing of claims through hospitals. Particularly if it goes from the current 25% level up to something closer to normal, there will be some sort of pulling back of that number. We'll have to see how that plays out. In terms of compensating contributors, my preferred view is that the insurance industry should retain its current premium levels, but that they should institute a special arrangement whereby, in particular, people who are on gold level cover, those are the ones most impacted by these changes, by no longer having access to the expensive elective procedures that are available under that highest level of cover, that those people should be allowed to reduce their cover to, say, silver for a period of time, for the period of the strange times that we're currently going through, and that depending on how long that period applies, they should have, in effect, an asterisk put next to their name in the records of the health fund, so that when things become normal again, whatever that means, they can resume a gold cover and obviously commence paying gold cover premiums, but shouldn't have the overhanging risk of having to reserve the relevant waiting periods. because under normal fund rules, if you're not paying the relevant premium amount for 2 months in most cases, then any resumption of cover at the higher level would normally require waiting periods to be served. So I think that would be a fair arrangement, and that would be the approach that I would recommend to the resolution of that issue. If at the end of the day the insurers decide that's not the way to go and they want to send cheques to individual members to reflect the loss of value that's occurred during this period, continuing as well from all reports, then I don't oppose that. I think that is a reasonable way to do it, but I do believe that the process should be overseen by some third party, not necessarily the Commonwealth Department of Health, but perhaps the Private Health Insurance Ombudsman, to ensure that there is an equitable process and that there's an industry-wide resolution rather than something which is left entirely to the discretion of individual funds. I think there should be an industry-wide resolution of that approach. On the broader issues more generally, I think the whole sector is undergoing massive change. I think basically the doors have been blown off the old model. We're going to be facing quite enormous developments. The private hospital sector is obviously going to be quite different after having experienced this period of temporary nationalisation. The medical practitioners as well. I think the most important thing that we still don't know, and which is going to be fundamental though, is judging the way in which consumers are going to be impacted by what's occurred. Because my feeling is that a lot of traditional users of health services, particularly older people, will be now more fearful and more careful about going to hospitals and to doctors generally. Obviously, the introduction of telehealth Medicare items have allowed some flexibility around that issue and allowed people to consult doctors from home. But I do think we are going to end up in an environment where the overall size of the health sector will be somewhat smaller than it has been in the past from the point of view of the demand that is driving it. And even if that is as high as, if I could put it in that way, as 90% of what it previously was, that is still going to be a very significant change in the overall business of the health sector, but private health insurance and the private health services sector generally. So we are at an interesting and challenging time in the development and progress in our health sector. I think we'll be looking back at this time in 15 and 20 years' time and seeing it as an enormous point of inflection and change where many things that we knew will be no more, and certainly I think some of those things will percolate through into the private health insurance business. Anyway, I'm happy to talk to any of you, or if you want to email me after this, certainly happy to continue the conversation. Thanks.